Coming up on Dialogue, school prayer. It's an emotional issue no matter what side you're on. We'll talk about it and take your calls next.
Funding for Dialogue is provided by the Friends of Idaho Public Television and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Good evening and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. 32 years ago, the United States Supreme Court outlawed what had become a tradition in many of America's schools, prayer. Since then, the Supreme Court has continued to issue opinions against various forms of school prayer. But in polls, a majority of Americans continue to say they favor it. To that end, House Speaker Newt Gingrich has said he wants lawmakers to vote on a proposed constitutional amendment allowing school prayer. And religious conservatives have been energized by the High Court's refusal to review a lower court ruling that student-initiated prayer at graduations is legal. But another court ruling from a case here in Idaho has drawn the opposite conclusion, that no matter who says or writes a graduation prayer, it violates the Constitution. This is a debate in which both sides can quote the Founding Fathers to support their positions, and both sides vow not to give up. Tonight we'll hear from two people who represent those positions. Beverly Harris, who filed a lawsuit to try and stop graduation prayer at her school in Grangeville, and Angie Cole, a member of the Bible Club at Capitol High School in Boise, who is a supporter of school prayer. Also here to give us some background on the debate is political science professor Steve Shaw of Northwest Nazarene College in Nampa. And we'll take your questions on our toll-free number, 1-800-973-9800. Welcome to all of you. Before we start tonight, I wanted to talk to our viewers and mention the part of the Constitution that most often comes into play when we're debating this issue, and that is from the First Amendment, what is known as the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. I think our director has that on the screen. It says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And of course, Dr. Shaw, that one statement, the Free Exercise Clause and the Establishment Clause, have created the debate that we have today.
That's a massive understatement. Those first 16 words in the Bill of Rights, as one Supreme Court justice put it years ago, have proven to be particularly vexatious. And the court, especially in the last 50 years, has had a very difficult time trying to ascertain what those words mean. There's not an awful lot to go on.
What is the problem? What is the conflict too? Is there conflict between the free exercise of religion and the establishment of religion? Is that part of the debate?
That's part of the debate. It's not all of it, but that's part of it. There is at least a potential conflict, and often an actual conflict between those two clauses, at least according to some scholars. What you often find, however, is the fact, as argued by many, that what you find in each of those clauses is religion, something that is not to be established and something whose free exercise is to be encouraged. And so many argue what you find inherently in those two clauses is something known as religion and something that is to be freely exercised and something whose establishment is prevented. Part of the problem has been defining religion for the court over the years, and part of the problem as well has been the historical meaning of those two clauses.
Well, and that brings me to what I want to show as our next graphic. Over the years, because there hasn't been a specific part of the Constitution that allows, say, school prayer or other religious things regards to a state, the courts have used something called the Lemon Test, and that's named that way from a case. And 3 prongs of the Lemon Test are: 1, the policy must have a non-religious purpose; 2, the policy must not overly entangle the school with religion; and 3, the policy cannot have the primary effect of endorsing a set of religious beliefs. This is what we've come up with so far to test this.
The Lemon Test has been around for roughly a quarter of a century. It comes from the case known as Lemon versus Kurtzman in 1971. it's still the primary test the court uses in trying to establish whether or not a violation of the Establishment Clause has occurred. What we've seen in recent years is the court, in essence, struggling with other kinds of tests that it may use in lieu of or in place of the Lemon test. And many have argued for the Lemon test to be jettisoned, but to this point that has not happened.
Well, this is probably the appropriate time to talk with my two other guests. First, Beverly Harris. Beverly, when I mentioned in the introduction about an Idaho case, a ruling in the Idaho case, that's a case that you originally filed when you were a high school student in Grangeville. Right. Why did you decide it was important, or you felt that a graduation prayer should not be said at your school?
Well, a graduation prayer has traditionally been said at the high school I went to, and I witnessed that over the years I was in high school before I became a senior. And the year I was a senior, it was particularly important to me to avoid a prayer at my graduation because I feel it does violate the Establishment Clause and it does violate the rules of the Lemon test because the primary effect of any prayer is to advance religious beliefs and to kind of promote a set of religious beliefs over any other. Whoever would be giving the prayer, or the majority that would be voting for the prayer, their religious beliefs would be promoted and advanced over those of any other person who happened to be in the minority.
When your school argued against you,
Right.
It said, well, you know, we allowed the students to take a vote on this, and a majority of them wanted to have the prayer. We didn't write it. They did everything. How did you feel about their side of the case?
Well, I tried to understand as much as I could where the people who wanted a prayer were coming from, but it just is so clearly unconstitutional because civil liberties is about protecting the rights of minorities, not about majority rule. You cannot turn religious beliefs or determining what religious values are most important over to the majority. Religious values are a very personal, private thing that should not be turned over to the majority and to the state.
Angie, how do you feel about this? You're very involved in your Bible club at school, and religion has meant a great deal to you in your life.
I feel that our country was founded and based upon the Bible and upon Christianity. I feel that's what we need to stick with. And when I personally believe, and there's many quotes that I've read that back me up on this, is that when our founding fathers said that it wouldn't prohibit the establishment of religion, they were talking about various sects of Christianity, so to speak, and they weren't talking about all the different religions, but what they wanted to get away from was they wanted to get away from what they had in Great Britain with the rule of just one particular sect of the church. They wanted it so that the churches and the different various parts of Christianity could flourish and they wouldn't be prohibited like it is now. And
what about what Beverly was talking about, the people or the minorities, the people from different religions or people who don't believe in religion? What would you suggest they do while a prayer is said, or maybe do you believe that the prayer should be a Christian prayer that's said?
I believe that's what our country was founded on, is a Christianity, and in the Bible I think it should be a Bible-based prayer.
And what should the other people who don't necessarily believe in that, what do you think they should do?
I don't know what else to say except for just to sit there and try to understand it. And I think after a while, after we continue and have prayer, they will see who God is, and they'll see who founded this, who made this world, and who founded this country. I mean, without God, it couldn't have been established.
This issue is not necessarily about religion in itself. It's not about whether I am rejecting or accepting God. It's not anti-religionist in any way at all. And I would say that your option for those who don't agree to sit quietly and respect the wishes of others might be appropriate in the case if I were a guest. I am never a guest in a country in which I pay taxes. I am never a guest in a public institution in this country. And as far as the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson was a deist. He was not a Christian. And he had the specific idea, and the founding fathers proposed voluntarism in religion, which meant that the state would not establish any religion at all, and that the churches would have to exist through a voluntary basis, and they would not have the support of the state. And by having a prayer in any public school or in any public forum, an organized prayer, that's specifically the state advancing a religion. And this is not a Christian nation, so to speak. There is no state religion that is Christianity, and those of us who may or may not be Christians should not have to abide by the religion of the majority.
What you were talking about with Thomas Jefferson, and how you said that he was a deist, and I believe he was a deist, but what you were talking about, how he said the voluntary and all that, well, Thomas Jefferson, he wanted the churches and the religious establishments to pay for themselves, which is, I mean, that's understandable. But I mean, like in the case when the University of Virginia, and how they said that that they wanted to have religious services and stuff on campus. He was totally for it. He was all for it. Him and Madison were said to be the ones that were against religion, but in fact they weren't. They were all for promoting religion, promoting the freedom thereof. And when it talks about, I think what we've done as a nation is we've gone away from the definition of religion when they were talking about it. They were talking about Christianity and the Christian sects. There's various quotes from numerous founding fathers that talk about how this nation was founded on God. This nation is a nation that is based upon the Bible. And it's not necessarily Christianity, it's the Bible and what's true in that.
Why don't we see what some of our viewers have to say and get back to the discussion. Elise in Blackfoot, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, what is your question or comment today?
I feel like that if we do live in a democracy, and that if, say, there's 1,000 students and 999 of them want to have prayer and one person don't, they should feel free to leave the auditorium or whatever, but I don't think you should take away rights of 999 people to support the values or disvalues of one person.
Okay, thanks for your comment.
May I speak to that?
You may.
Obviously, majority rule is a cornerstone of our political system, but Madison, who's often seen as the father of the Constitution and the framer of the First Amendment, Madison argued that especially important are minority rights, that whenever the majority can threaten the minority, you have no justice. And there's one quote, I mean, I'm, as a professor of con law, I'm tempted to quote maybe too many court cases, or too many justices, but just over 50 years ago, Justice Robert Jackson, in the flag salute and prayer case from West Virginia, said that the very purpose of a Bill of Rights was to establish the fact that some rights are not up for vote, that they don't depend on the outcome of any election. And he mentioned, for example, the freedom of religion, that you don't put it up for vote because just because you have the numbers, it may not mean that it's wise.
Certainly there is another, in the Fifth Circuit, there was an opinion that came out on school prayer at graduation,
Right.
which did, though, say that those justices felt that because a majority
Right.
had
was
wanted it.
the Jones versus Clear Creek case from 1992. And it's interesting when you read that opinion, what the three members of that Court of Appeals did was to, in essence, say it's really not a prayer. It's a solemn ritual, but it's really not a religious prayer. And they were at pains, I think, to establish the fact that this wasn't so much a religious exercise as it was a solemn tradition. Because if something is seen as religious, which most of us would see a prayer as, then it runs up against the very first prong of the Lemon test of having a religious purpose, not a non-religious or secular purpose.
Let's go to another caller. Ray in Boise, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, your comment or question, please.
The phrase that we hear all the time, separation of church and state, that is not in the Constitution. That is a coined phrase. And the part that says the state shall not establish a religion means just that. It means that the state and the government should keep their nose out of religion and leave it up to the churches and the people to practice their religion as they see fit.
Okay, thanks for your comment. Certainly what he's referring to is a letter or a speech that Jefferson gave where he coined the phrase a wall of separation between church and state.
That phrase, however, appeared a century and a half before Jefferson used it. It was first used in 1644 by Roger Williams, in essence the founder of Rhode Island. And Williams wanted a wall of separation between the church and the state, primarily to protect religion.
The phrase has been around, but how are we to, we hear a lot about how there's now people have been saying there's freedom from religion, that there's been an over burdening, or people have been spending too much time analyzing every utterance
Sure.
In the classroom. Some children have been taken to task for bowing their heads during school lunch and things like that. Have we gone too far in this separation of church and state?
I don't think we have at all. I think that what we really need to look at is what the professor was saying, where the Bill of Rights is to say that some some rights are not open to a majority vote. I think that it infringes on my freedom of religion and my guarantee to be able to have whichever religion I want if some representative of a school district gets up and makes a prayer that has the effect of the school district endorsing a certain set of beliefs that may not be my own, and there's an element of coercion in that. And if I should get up and leave the room, or if I should just ignore it or whatever, that is saying to me that my beliefs are not as important as others, and that I should just go along with what other people believe in this country.
What I believe is that believing in God isn't just a belief that's out there. It's the truth. And it's something that if you look out there around you and you really look, you'll see God. I mean, it's not something that you have to look hard for. And what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about a religion. I'm not talking about beliefs. I'm talking about what our nation, once again, and what our nation was founded on, and that's the Bible. And when people keep saying the separation of church and state, like that man said, it's not in the Constitution. And when the founding fathers, when they said what they were talking about with the Establishment Clause and stuff like that, they were talking about the federal government and the states. That should be left to the states, like in the 10th Amendment, when it says all the rights should be left to the states. That's what it is. It's a state thing. It's something that the people in the state can go with, and it's not a thing between the church and the state. It's a thing between not letting the federal government rule over the states.
I don't understand how people on your side can want the church or the state to be involved with the church. Doesn't that endanger your religion and your church, so to speak, if the state has the right to meddle in your affairs as a Christian? And I don't understand either. This whole prayer issue doesn't even make a whole lot of sense. Why? It seems to me like religion should be a personal thing, and that parents should have the right to teach their children the spiritual values as they choose. As a potential parent, I don't want to think about the state or any school, any teacher, any principal endorsing a certain set of beliefs to my child.
Certainly, Angie, you can pray in school right now if you want to. What would be the difference between you just saying a prayer or a silent prayer, which I assume you have or do, and everyone doing it? Why would you like to see everyone do it?
Because it would show people where the power comes from, and that's from God, and I think it would put back the accountability upon people that there is. Like, you look at the schools before, like 1962, I think it was, when they took out the 10 Commandments in the schools. And you look at it before then, and then you look at it after, and there has been a drastic downfall in our nation because of that.
Let's see what some of the other viewers have to say. Mark and Haley, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Yes, and your comment or question, please, for our panel?
Well, my comment's very simple. There's a time and place for everything, and I feel that to force an issue on a certain group is wrong. That's why they have church. If you believe in this, well, then you go to church and believe it. But to force it on people in school, to people that are viewed against different kind of opinions, I don't feel that's right. So I just think that there's a time and place for everything, and that's what church is for.
Okay. Thank you very much. Angie, did you want to respond to that?
I think that if there was a time and place for everything, and there is a time and place for everything except for God is in our everyday lives, God's with us all the time. And if we're just going to say, okay, God's only in church, that knocks down our accountability, and I think that's why the nation is the way it is, because it doesn't have that accountability, and it doesn't acknowledge what they're supposed to do. We have no moral absolutes anymore, and that's what the people have been taught, and that's why people, like all the guns and the weapons that have been found at schools lately and things like that, and that's why things like that are happening, because people don't have anything to grasp onto. And if God was back into the schools, they'd have that security, they'd have that foundation and those absolutes to hold on to.
I don't think that is right at all, and I don't think that this is an issue about religion per se. It's not an issue about saying God is not in the school. I'm not saying that God is or isn't anywhere, and you're assuming that those of us who do not want prayer in schools are some sort of atheists or what have you, and that is not necessarily true. That is not true by a long shot. There are so many faith communities that are just unquestionably opposed to having a prayer in school because they want to be able to deal with members of their own faith on their own terms. They do not want the state meddling in their religious affairs. And I think that you just can't say that we're kicking God out of the school and we're saying God is not in the school, God is only in the church. That's not a fair assumption for you to make. We're just saying that you do not have your right to put your beliefs about God and your particular morality over on me in this country. You are taking away my freedom of religion and the freedom of religion of everybody in any audience, in any group, if one person is allowed in a state-sponsored event to get up and say a blanket prayer over the whole entire community.
Let's see, again, let's go back to the phone calls. Sherry in Spokane, Washington, are you there?
Yes, I am.
And your comment or question tonight, please.
I have to agree with Angie. I believe in school prayer 100%. I am a churchgoer. God founded this country. He was the first one here, besides Christ. Angie has a terrific point. I pray. I go to college right now, and I pray constantly, all day through college. Because if I didn't, and I didn't believe in God where I am now, I wouldn't be where I am.
And are your feelings that can this be something you do privately, or do you wish that other people would do it as well? And if so, what kind of prayer should be said?
I believe everybody should have to do it. I mean, I'm not trying to push my religion on anybody. I don't believe in pushing my religion on anybody. And I wouldn't force anybody to believe my religion, but yet I do. I totally believe that Christ is with everybody, is around everybody, and I believe that one day everybody will find out who God really is when they go to heaven or when they go to hell.
Okay.
Let's not assume, first of all, that I do not know who God is.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that you don't.
You just want me to have to believe the beliefs you believe.
No.
You want me to have to pray your prayers as the person who may be in the majority.
Now you're assuming on me, just like you said Angie was assuming on you. Now you're assuming on me.
You're the one who said that you do believe that everyone should have to pray.
Right, because I do.
And
that's my belief. Just like you have yours, I have mine. Just like Angie has hers, you have yours.
You're contradicting yourself.
No, I'm not. How? Tell me how.
This is clearly an emotional issue, and one which is going to be in the political arena before long. And we're going to move on to some other calls. I appreciate your call, Sherry, very much, and I hope you continue listening. When you were filing your lawsuit, obviously you came up against lots of opinions in your town. What was the reaction in Grangeville?
My life has been threatened many times. My brothers were ambushed on their way home from school and beaten up. Our cats were killed. Our tires were slashed. People crossed the street to avoid walking on the street the same side as me and my family, all in the name of God.
How are we to deal with that aspect, or the people that feel that strongly that they might do something like that?
I think if people are really with God and for prayer in school and things like that, then they wouldn't be acting like that. That's just wrong. That's against the Bible. That's against everything that I personally believe. I'm not saying that you don't believe in God. I'm just saying I know what the Bible says. And
what does the Bible say about having prayer in public schools in the United States of America?
It doesn't mention the United States of America.
What does it say about public schools?
It doesn't say anything about public schools either.
Let's move on here. And Chet in Boise, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, your question, please.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the panel thinks about the Congress and the Senate that has a prayer before every meeting that they have, and also that our money says, "In God we trust," and I'm not necessarily religious.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Shaw. In God we trust, the Pledge of Allegiance has God.
The court has made is when it comes to prayer in school, which has been the controversial arena concerning politics and religion, at least in the modern era. When it comes to prayer in school, what the Supreme Court has focused on is the school setting. Quite different from, say, an opening of the Supreme Court or an opening of Congress or carrying around currency. One that we have compulsory attendance laws. So students, unless they go to a private school or unless they're truants, they're in public school. And secondly, the fact of a relative youthful population. So the court has over the years drawn a distinction between the setting we're talking about or the context. That for Congress to do it is one thing, for it to be done in a public school, given the age and given the compulsory setting, is another matter altogether.
Is that a contradiction?
Not in the eyes of the court, at least not in the eyes of most of the court. One thing I should add here, Marcia, is that in a lot of these cases you will not find a unanimous court. It's often bitterly divided, 5-4, or If you're lucky, you can find maybe an 8-to-1 opinion, but most of them are not unanimous because there's not much to go on here. You showed the 16 words earlier. If you go just on the text, that doesn't help you that much. If you turn to history, the debate tonight shows that history is not crystal clear. So, there's so many references to use, so many citations to bring up, and they often may point in different directions, and that's reflected in the court itself.
Let's take one more call. Samuel from Lewiston has been waiting for a while. Samuel?
Yeah.
Your comment, please.
I'd like to know people in the communities and people of political sides. I want to know why they're making such a big deal about this. I want to know why people in schools can't just, pray if they want to pray, and people that don't want to pray, just go with what they're doing. I want to know why people in politics are making a big deal about this.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comment. This may be a good way to wrap up the debate. I'll go to both of you. First, Angie, why is this such an important issue for you?
Like I said before, we can't be taking God out of the schools and out of our public lives, I guess you can say, because it takes away all the absolutes. It takes away everything that this nation was founded on. It takes away everything I personally believe that is true and that is fact. I think that people need to know who God is. They need to know, and I'm not saying that you don't know who God is, okay? I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that people in the schools need to realize where the power and where the source is, where we can go to every day and acknowledge and find our accountability and our security in Him.
Okay, very briefly, Anne?
I think religion is such a personal issue. It's such a divisive issue. Obviously, it should be kept out of public affairs. I do think that it's important for families to deal with religion themselves. It should not be in the public forum. Right now, you have any time you want, day or night, in public school, out of public school, you have the right to pray. I see no need for any majority to force its religious beliefs on any people at all.
And Professor, you'll get the last word here. Do you think this issue, or Beverly's case, is right for the Supreme Court to take up?
I think it's ripe for this reason primarily. We've got a conflict at the circuit court level between the Ninth Circuit, the Fifth Circuit, and the Third Circuit. They've issued conflicting rulings. When the Court of Appeals comes down with a decision, it applies only to that geographical region, the Ninth Circuit here in the western U.S. So I think those are going to percolate up to the Supreme Court, and I suspect within the next 2 years the court will come down with a ruling concerning student-led prayer at graduation, as in the case from Grangeville in the Ninth Circuit.
Okay, well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. I'd like to revisit this debate later next year when the issue comes up in Congress. My thanks to my guests, Beverly Harris, Angie Cole, and Dr. Steve Shaw. And thanks to you for watching and calling. Next week on Dialogue, Joan Cartan Hansen will talk with Jack Lemley, who was in charge of the corporation that built the channel between England and France. Mr. Lemley will also take your questions about this amazing engineering feat. Thanks for joining us. Tune in next week. Good night.
Dialogue is a production of Idaho Public Television and is funded by the Friends of Idaho Public Television and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
To purchase a videotape of this program, please contact Idaho Public Television at 1-800-543-6868.